Hello, and thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm Glennis McClure, Extension Educator and Farm and Ranch Management Analyst with the Center for Ag Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We typically host these webinars every Thursday at noon Central Time, and you can always find an updated schedule, registrations, and an archive of all of our past webinars on our website at cap.unl.edu. Today, we're excited to look at the profitability of stacked extended crop rotations for soil health and how using the agricultural budget calculator program can help with analysis and planning. We're really glad to be joined today by Jeff Steffen, who operates an integrated crop and livestock farm near Crofton, Nebraska. Jeff is a member of the Nebraska Natural Resource Commission Board and the Lewis and Clark Natural Resource District Board. He also serves as a technical advisor of the Bow Creek Watershed Project. During this webinar, he'll provide an overview of his operation that focuses on stacked extended crop rotations and integrating a cow herd on grazing mixed cover crops. Jeff has used the free ag budget calculator developed by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to analyze cropping scenarios over the last few years and to track profitability that has resulted. He'll discuss how, over time, he's been able to estimate enterprise and whole farm profitability with fewer inputs and increased revenue. As you have questions, please go ahead and type those in the Q&A or the chat part of the Zoom window, and we will answer them as we go along or at the end. So again, welcome, Jeff Steffen. We'll go ahead and turn things over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Glennis. Hear me loud and clear now?
Yep.
So
Sounds good.
Yes, all good. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So yeah, thanks for that introduction. Yeah, my name is Jeff Steffen, and I'm gonna see if, okay, I'm trying to advance. Okay, we got that. Okay, now it's working. This is our farm in northeast Nebraska. Jolene and I farm about 500 acres, and we have been on this farm for 40 years. And that was back in the 1980s. That was a hard time when we started. I like to always say that we really depended on the University of Nebraska for helping us with our financial management. We used them a lot for help with our livestock and crop, enterprises, and it's something that's always been a part of our management. And for 40 years, we've been following their advice. So, just to kind of get an overview, this is our family. Jolene, my wife, and we have 2 grown children. They've gone on to professional careers. They're still really interested in what we're doing here. Not saying they won't ever come back, we're not sure, but that's our family. So extending rotations for soil health and profitability. And I like to show these 4 pictures here because it's kind of it's a representation of our rotation. Those bottom 2 pictures there, we do corn and soybeans. We incorporate cover crops into the system. But it's the top 2 pictures that really enables us to lower the inputs in our operation. We do grow a lot of oats in the Crop Improvement Association. We condition it for seed, but we have other crops as well. But the ability to put a small grain in our rotation, that gives us the ability to plant a diverse cover crop and graze it. And it really reduces the inputs on our corn and beans. And I always say the top 2 pictures is what makes the bottom 2 pictures work in our operation. And then, I'll add to it that we also somewhat stack the rotation. Is something I learned from Dwayne Beck, Dakota Lakes Research. We might go 3 years without corn on a particular field, and then we're able to go back to back with corn on that field before the disease and insect presence comes back. That's that's the reason you call it a stacked extended rotation. Few other crops, I like diversity in our cropping system. So we do grow buckwheat. We'll grow oats and peas together, harvest them together. In the bottom middle here, that is hairy vetch and cereal rye. We harvested that together last year. And also we even grow milling quality cereal rye. Jolene actually mills grain for our own use and for family use too. So a lot of it is sold for seed. So what we've learned in the last 40 years, trying to change for soil health, and one thing is we have to be changed. We have to be patient because change is sometimes slow, but we always try to follow the soil health principles. And anytime we have a step backwards or something doesn't turn out how we want it to, it seems like it's because we didn't follow one of the principles of soil health. And then it seems like we get very little improvements in our economics if we don't judicially reduce inputs. And that is, you can't just reduce inputs to do it and possibly hurt your bottom line that way. But as we improve soil health, we feel we need to challenge the system and reduce inputs. And then we have to know our own numbers and be true to them. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of noise out there. We need to grow more yield. We need to change and do this or that. But if you know your own numbers, if you know your own profitability and you're profitable, you really have to consider, do I really need to change? My numbers are telling me that I'm doing fine. And then always be willing to give a little back. And you can relate that to community and everything, but I look at it as giving back to your farm. It is, I'll plant a particular crop, not expecting near the profitability of, say, another crop, but it's helping the system, and that's my way of giving back to the farm and my soil health. And it seems like when I do that, when I give a little back, it returns more back to me in turn. So long term, I titled this long-term research. It's because this is our first no-till field back in 1990. And I consider this a big success. And when you look at the soil structure, and obviously there was a lot of sheet and rill erosion, my win on this picture was that we didn't have to replant the corn. I considered that um, a win. You can look at that and say, well, no-till really doesn't work that great. It took years to improve the structure and the effectiveness of no-till on this soil. So kind of our game plan. So we stack the rotation. It's not necessarily a set rotation, but I always have in the back of my mind that I want to have a 2 or more year break between the same crop. Like I said, I could have 2 years of corn back to back, but I prefer then to have at least 3 years before I have corn on that field again. We want a third crop on the rotation, whether it be oats, peas, wheat, rye, annual grazing, which we've just added. And right now, probably a little over a third of our farm is something other than corn and soybeans. So what I like about having that third crop, especially if it's a spring crop, is we can plant a diverse summer cover crop after that spring crop. And that's where we get a really successful cover crop with a lot of biomass that really helps our system out. Before soybeans, if it's after corn, we'll plant cereal rye, terminated as late as possible in the spring. If it's before corn, after corn, or after soybeans, I'll put in hairy vetch as soon as I can in the fall, and rye, oats, and brassicas. And then we graze cattle on cover crops. And we will have cattle on most of our farm ground at one point or another through the year. So does this pay? And that leads us into the agriculture budget calculator that I discovered when Glennis started working on it. For many years, I've used the budgets that UNL would put out kind of as a template to compare to my operation. But this tool takes it a step farther. What I really like is I can analyze by field if I so choose. I can put it into a whole farm module, analyze the whole farm as a whole. I can also, it actually, if you take the time, you can put your own machinery in it. So it effectively analyzes your machinery, how effective that is. And at the end of the year, when you look at your costs and everything, you can actually go to this tool and actually reconcile those actual costs with what you had predicted. And it actually makes it a very accurate tool to use for analysis. I'm actually on a bank board. I would be really tickled if a young farmer came to me with a report from this tool showing his entities in his fields and so forth that showed what his profitability would be. And also would look forward to if they would actually get a livestock module with this. So a little bit about our farm economic analysis. One thing, this is not a blueprint on how I think you should manage your farm for profitable soil health. What's your context? Depending on your rainfall, latitude, and so forth, you just need basically, I'm just trying to show some of the basics that we use for soil health that gives us the profitability that we're getting. And also, this analysis does not include any government payments or incentives. I'm trying to show that farming the way we do is profitable on its own, and it needs to be. But what this is, it's a close analysis of our farm's profitability. I've been working quite a few years, probably the last 10 years, on trying to compare what we're doing with what the local corn soybean farmer is doing for profitability. And, I've been put quite a bit of work into it. So, I'm getting more confident with it every year. And then one thing we can do with the ag budget calculator is I can pick various budgets and do a comparison. So you can incorporate into the budget calculator, you can bring in UNL crop budgets, which are very well thought out, very well done. And we will take those budgets, fine tune them to our area, and then we'll compare that. We'll use that as a comparison tool to what our farm is actually doing. So we'll fine tune it. I have a local agronomist I've worked with quite a bit, and he will make suggestions on fine tuning the budget for the corn soybean farmers of the area, and then we use that to compare with the profitability of our farm. So before I get into the numbers a little bit, I just want to talk a little bit more on what makes our system work and our rotation. So a key is that we have that third crop. Like I said, we do raise quite a bit of oats. It's very good in our climate. Our growing zone is a little bit more like southeast South Dakota. And traditionally, this has been an oats growing area. This is a field of oats right in this area. It's over 150 bushels an acre right here. Having oats in the rotation, it allows us we usually leave all the straw on the field. Allows us to get more carbon in the system. And after harvest, we can go in and drill. Even on drier years, the cover gives us enough moisture savings that we can get a cover crop started. So then by September, we can have a cover crop like this. And this picture really shows, I feel, what charges the whole system to function efficiently. When you have that much diversity, waking up microbes that probably have been dormant for a long time to feed the soil, and then to be able to come in and graze it. Here's a cover crop we have. We'll vary the cover crop mixes if it's going to be going to soybeans or if it's going to go to corn. This is more of a, I call it more of a carbon mix before soybeans. But the benefit, another benefit we get of it is then we will fall and winter graze all winter on cows. And even in the snow, we can, I have a brother-in-law with a large cow herd, and I can pretty much have cows on the whole farm, and very little hay is used, and they get good at grubbing in the snow. So this is that field. If you look at this field here that they're grazing in the fall, this is that field in the spring. That was a winter killed cover crop mix. There's no burn down been applied to this field yet. Planting non-GMO soybeans on May 5th. So this is what really gives us a break in the weed cycle and the disease cycle. So by August 21st, here's non-GMO soybeans. There was no glyphosate applied on this field. We used some old chemistry. There was a pre-emergent early, and then a group 14 burning herbicide on for broadleafs later, and it's been an effective crop for us. Our corn in our rotation, I didn't mention on the soybeans, we use almost all non-treated seed in our operation now, and it's something we've slowly evolved into, that we've discovered that it works again. You can't just throw it into a system that's not as healthy to start with, but we've slowly noticed that we can get by with using untreated seed. This is non-GMO corn, non-treated seed planted in residue. You almost think that shouldn't work, but there it is. On the right there, we have UNL actually was doing some moisture studies with cover crop, but you can see really good stand of corn with non-treated seed.
Jeff, I will, if you don't mind, stop you. We have a question that came in.
Sure.
If you want to jump in on this, that's great. Glennis, probably you can as well. It asks if the Ag Budget Calculator tool would allow you to compare rotations, for example, Jeff's extended rotation versus a typical corn soybean rotation.
Yes, and that's what I'm going to be getting to here. I'm just giving an overview of the operation, and I'll show you how I'm comparing it. Glennis actually came up with a better idea on how to compare it, but I'll be getting to that here shortly. But that's what I use it for, to compare what I'm doing to traditional corn and soybean in the area.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So our fertility right now, if the field is after oats with a really good diverse cover crop, we put no nutrients on until about this stage. This is about V7, and I'm just drilling some UAN at the base of the plant. So this field received basically just 70 units of N. We get a lot of energy, and that's why I was talking about the cover crop charging the system up from the year before. We get really good yields with just a little bit of fertilizer inputs on the corn. So analyzing the whole farm with the calculator, and here's where I'm going to get into how we are comparing. So if you go into the calculator, you can load in all the budgets you want, and this is for crop enterprises for 2025. What I brought into this crop year is 4 budgets, and these are the budgets that we brought in that we think reflects the area corn and soybean budgets. We have one for dryland corn, one for irrigated corn, and then dryland soybeans and irrigated soybeans. And it's diesel pivot because our farm is approximately half irrigated. So this is the comparison I'm using. A farm that's corn and beans, approximately half irrigated. So it's 125 acres of each crop, which comes to 500 acres. And I can select just those budgets here to kind of give you an estimate of what that return would be. And this is for 2025, actually. This is figuring like our local $4.20 corn price, I think 973 beans. And we're coming up with a $39,000 loss on 500 acres. And I think this amounts to around $78 or so an acre loss. And actually that's kind of in line with what I've been reading. I like to go to Illinois Farm Doc website, and they always have some estimates on what they think corn and beans are doing on the year for profitability. And I've been coming up with real similar numbers there. So then I can go back. Well, first of all, I'll show you, the breakdown. You can break down each, there's a graph for each farm that or each field that you have selected. So just an idea. So you can see the profitability of the corn and the beans. So then I go back into the 2025 crop enterprises. And now what I've done is I've deselected the corn and bean budgets for the local corn and bean farmers. And I put in basically our acres, what they will be this year for dryland corn, 105 acres, irrigated corn, 115. And then I also have put in our cover crop expenses and how many acres of cover crop we have. We have oats, dryland, oats irrigated. We even have some Hazlet rye that's under irrigated irrigation. And it says 825 acres down there, and that's because, 325 acres are basically double seeded in order to get the cost of those cover crops in there. But what this is, this will be a reflection of the 500 acres. So instead of the $39,000 loss, we have on our whole farm analysis, we had an $84,000 net profit. And if I'll show you later, most of that comes from just the overall farm lowering of input costs. So here's a breakdown of each enterprise of the cropping system. And you can see the profitability by dryland corn, irrigated corn. One of our entities that I have in here is the annual grazing after oats, which there's some profit there because we have a return from that. The cover crop after small grain, profitability there. Okay, the fall planted cover crop on the bottom here, that's all cost. There's no revenue associated with it because it's not grazed. We have oats, dryland. Oats irrigated is a break even, but I need to have that in the system, even though it's showing a break even at best. And I'd like to point out on the oats, when I figure revenue on that, I am taking the seed enterprise out of the system. This is just using a commodity price for oats. So that's kind of a breakdown of the entire operation there. So where does that profitability come? I put these numbers together. So our costs compared to the local crop budgets for 2025. And this is overall the whole farm. So our field operation cost is 51% of the corn and bean budget. And chemicals, 18%, seed, 64%, fertilizer is 37%. And a lot of that reduction in costs is because that third crop is just a lot cheaper to put in. In the end, it might have less revenue, but our overall expenses are that much less. So this goes more into detail here, and this is showing when you go into the calculator, you can do a report of selected enterprise. So I've compared our 115 acres of irrigated corn to the UNL budget of irrigated corn And I've even conceded 20 bushels an acre. I'm figuring 225 on mine and 245. We really don't push our corn probably as hard as we could. I'm always kind of mindful of I don't want excess nutrients out there getting into the watershed. So it breaks it down by seed. You can see, definitely we're using non-GMO corn. We have a lot less cost in seed there. And it might not work in all systems, but it's working for us now with our rotation. Fertility, I'm figuring 110 pounds compared to 200, cost savings there. This past year, we raised a bushel of corn on 0.35 units of N. And I'm figuring actually, a little more nitrogen here than our results we had this year. Pesticides, we've used no insecticide or fungicide since 2011. With the rotation, we've been able to kind of circumvent that need. So you can see we're pretty detailed on the pesticides that we're using as far as the comparison. I don't have the machinery difference here, but a lot of the difference there is just less passes. So here's a comparison by the graphs that shows the difference. And if you note, the big savings is on our system, the material input. It's generally, we just have we're putting a lot less chemistry and fertilizer on. So our net revenue is actually less on corn, but our total costs are so much less that we're having profitability. So then what I'll do is I'll take numbers from the budget calculator and I'll come up with these graphs. So this is actual results from 2023. The blue bars is our extended rotation soil health system that shows the revenue and then the cost per acre and then the net. And this is the comparison that we had those years and that year. And obviously, we did quite a bit better than corn and beans. We had excellent oat yield this year in 2023, some of the best oats we ever had. Therefore, the farm did quite well. So for 2024, last spring, I made this projection. And this was figuring 480 cash corn, $12 soybeans, which we know we no longer have, but everything looked pretty good. But 2024 was a challenging year. So at the end of 24, I had to redo. Now I went from projections to this is actual results. And we had a challenging year. We had hail. We had 2 years of very dry weather, or 2 months of very dry weather that hurt yields in the end. I went to the agronomist in the fall and the local insurance agent just to kind of get an idea on the yields that we could put in for the average corn and beans in the area. And it showed that we were still be able to show some profitability. And there was some, there was some serious loss in the area as far as corn and beans for the inputs we had to use this year and the yields we got. So I'm just going to show show some of the success and the challenges that we had this year in 2024, what we analyzed there. This is the first year we did annual grazing, which meant there was no other cash crop planted on this field. It was simply planted for grazing. We grazed the cereal rye in the spring when we had quite a bit of moisture early. Therefore, that got ahead of the cows. So that's May 28th, I'm drilling a multi-species cover crop in there. We terminated the rye, and 60 days later, we had that top picture. cows and cover crop. So this was a profitable venture this year. The oats was a different story. We had hail in the reproductive stage. I didn't think there was much damage, but it did open it up for disease and rust. So we probably had half the oats yields of what we would normally expect. And I don't insure the oats. It's a tough crop to insure. Soybeans, we had aphids that showed up. For about 3 weeks, we had aphids, and I was bound and determined not to put any insecticide on. They never really did get very healthy looking, the aphids. I wish I would have did some Brix readings on the plants to see if you know, if the sugar content was higher. Nevertheless, in 3 weeks, we had parasitic wasps that pretty much wiped out the aphids. But we did have some weed problems with the non-GMO beans, and I attribute that to a mistake I made with the previous year. We had buckwheat in this field the year before, which leaves very little residue, even with the cover crop. I can no longer control water hemp post-emergent in soybeans. I have to culturally control it. So this field is right in front of the house. We had weedy soybeans, and so I did a comparison on it, and the field looked bad, probably a lot worse than it actually was as far as the weed population on it. The best dryland soybeans I could find in our neighborhood was on sub-irrigated bottom ground, 60 bushels an acre. Our field still went 51, and it was non-GMO beans that we got 12.18 for. So this is a comparison I did just on that field. Our revenue was still higher with the premium for non-GMO beans, and our cost was much lower, and we still had our soybeans were profitable this year compared to the average corn and beans in the area. And here's an example of what did work with the non-GMO soybeans. This is actually a certified soybean seed field. The difference is last year it was in oats with a really diverse cover crop to break the weed cycle, and there was just very little water hemp in it. The corn side this year, we had quite a bit of moisture early. So here I'm planting corn into standing cover crop. I used to say don't plant corn after cereal rye, but our soils now are cycling so fast that this is by July 22nd. That's all the residue that's left. This picture is taken right where the tractor was sitting in the picture before. So most of our corn, we've gone to non-treated seed. This is the first year we did some stand counts. We had a test plot with corn, and the treated seed had a better final stand. So there was some population loss this year. We hadn't noticed it in any previous years. Interestingly, though, in the test plot, non-treated seed hybrid did win the test plot, even with less population. There was a lot of southern rust and tar leaf spot. We saw very little of any of that. So again, no insecticide, fungicide. And our corn yields on dry land were actually, I would say, very good for August and September, record dry. Our irrigated was probably less than what I would normally expect. The ground we do irrigate is sandy. So if it does not rain, it's pretty hard to keep up with it. So going forward, using the calculator, I come up with this projection for 2025, figuring our local 420 cash corn, put into the calculator. Gross revenue, we're less, but still lower cost per acre. and we have quite a bit of difference in net. So where are we picking up these efficiencies? And that kind of leads me to, my soil health observations. What's giving us increased profitability with less inputs? And I don't always like to show pictures of fence line with the neighbor here on one side and my field on the left. But, to give this is a young farmer, to give him credit, he did no-till this field. He did a little tillage in the corners. But there was just no residue there, and he probably overused the row cleaners a little bit. That field had to be replanted. We had a heavy rain event this spring, and he had to replant it. I actually have corn planted on my field on the left. And I've only farmed that field on the left for 4 years, and we've been able to change it pretty fast. And anyhow, the next picture, if you pay attention to the top of the hill, this picture is taken September 3rd at a reverse direction from the top of the hill looking down. So our field is on the right now. You can see the difference that made. He had to go in and replant that corn, so it was actually a little behind our field. Quite a bit of difference in green. And other moisture savings that we notice, and a lot of us have probably seen this comparison of temperature with bare soil. That's our field on the left with the kind of cover I like to plant into. And the field on the right is actually no-till with row cleaners. And this is in June, 92-degree air temp, and you have almost a 35 degree temperature variation. So what does that do for moisture efficiency? And 70-degree soil, we're using 100% of the moisture for growth. But when you get to 100 degrees soil temp, only 15% of that is being used for growth, and you're losing 85% to evaporation transpiration. 130 degrees, 100% lost, and at 140, we're losing soil microbes that we are so wishing that we had. And this picture kind of speaks for itself. It's the difference in stable soils, ground cover, and there's the cover crop is just emerging, but you can really see the difference. Other ways that we are getting efficiency out of our farm ground is I did a core sample. These are exact same soil types, field apart. And not only are we getting carbon in the top 8 inches, we're getting carbon down to depth. And I took cores down to 3 feet. When I got to the last foot, I hit the dry soils. It was hard to keep the cores together. When I got down to 2 foot on the topsoil, I could no longer get the probe in. It just turned into absolutely rock hard soil. So we can get carbon down. These are sandy soils. We can get carbon down to depth, and that's your give back. You have carbon down that deep, that can be feeding your crop on tough years. So if you go to Web Soil Survey and you look at this, where this bucket or this scoopful of soil was taking, it'll show that this soil is Thurman sand. It's 70% sand, less than 15% clay, and it just shows what you can do with rotation as far as improving the aggregates to your soil. And that big worm there, that's a night crawler. He'll pull corn leaves down into the ground 2-3 feet, and that's part of the reason we're getting carbon down deep. So in closing, the ag budget calculator, I think it's It's a great tool that we can use to analyze our own farm, and it's free. I just tell people Google UNL ABC calculator, and you'll come up with it. Then we have our sponsors that I'm sure have helped with this. So I just think it's a great tool that UNL has put out.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Yes. And we really appreciate Jeff has been one of those. You were kind of one of the early adopters using the program, I believe. And we appreciate that you've provided feedback to us. And yes, we are very, very, very close to launching the livestock piece of it. It'll be just a little while before we integrate that livestock, those livestock budgets into the whole farm. So, but that's coming. I mean, it's now. We talked, but we should be within a couple of weeks here, or if not, just this few days. So we'll have it live then
Yep.
too. So I think there is a question here. Rebecca says, great presentation. How do you go about assigning a value of the forage value that you get from cover crops?
Okay, I think I heard you. How do I figure the value of the forage from the cover crop?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good question. I did not mention that. So beings there is not a livestock module. What I'm doing is I'm figuring grazing days that the cattle are on there, grazing days per acre. I'm figuring the dry matter that they're consuming, and that's an estimate. And then what I'm doing is I'm putting a value on that. So when in the calculator, what I'm putting is a certain tonnage of dry matter per price. And basically what it does is it comes up with, like say we're getting $1 a day for grazing. So it's putting a value on that much forage. If it's a cow-calf pair, I know it's eating approximately 30 pounds of dry matter. So that's how I'm putting the value in that for now.
So, and it was really great to hear your story and kind of how things have improved on your farm. Would you say, I mean, again, you were an early adopter of the ABC program, so it's progressed along. I think the whole farm piece in, but would you say that it's, I mean, easy to use? I've had folks tell me it's pretty intuitive. What would you say about that, Jeff?
Okay, I think I got that. Is it intuitive to use the calculator, is what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did make the comment that the first day I used it, it was a little painful because of all, I put a lot of data into it, the machinery and everything. I never ever did go to like a class to use it. So it was intuitive. Pretty soon I was once I got the data in, that's where it's really nice. Because you can zoom around in it pretty fast, and I can quickly get to the depth of a cost. Like if I'm trying to figure out how did UNL come up with this cost per acre, like on irrigation, you can intuitively go into field operations, go into irrigation, and I can find out, yep, they used, this is how many inches they put on. This is even down to what investment they were figuring on for the irrigation that it took to get it. So, yeah, I've used the tool without any, I never did have a class on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And we do ongoing trainings on the ag budget calculator. So, I mean, we oftentimes do those on Zoom, but we're willing to do those in person if there's a group of folks that want to learn about it. And anyway, so is there any other questions? I don't see.
Sorry, Glennis, you froze up there for a second. But yeah, if anyone has any other questions, please do put those in the chat right now. If you're closing out of Zoom, when you do go, you'll see a short survey that just kind of tells us how this webinar went and informs future webinars here from the Center for Ag Profitability. So if you just take 30 seconds to complete that, we'd really appreciate that. But again, if you want to ask a question yet of Jeff or Glennis, please do type that into the chat or the Q&A.
Okay. I don't see any more, but thank you. This will be recorded, so be sure to share with others. This information, I think it was a lot of really great information, Jeff, coming from, the point of view of soil health and what you do on your farm. So again, thanks everyone and have a great afternoon.
Okay, thank you for everything.